Are you able to see the slide? Anyone respond? Are you able to see the slide?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
fine. So I will go for dual recording. Also, I am coming with one recap of last class what we had covered, that convexity of higher dimension function can be reduced to convexity of just finding function of one variable through a line. And why I will recall, because it will find a lot of applications there in uh, many optimization algorithms, such as backtrack, such as gradient descent, and other kind of also. So in gradient descent or whatever else, you always you can't go with a fixed step size or learning rate. That step size or learning rate you are calling it. So in order to control that step size or learning rate, you have to go for line search. So line search is nothing, just it is all about you are mm, restricting your function along a line. So like gradient descent, you might have already seen the algorithm or update uh, part, like xk plus 1, it happens equal to xk minus alpha times, or sometimes some book they are writing t. So it depends upon which notation you are proceeding with. So there would be no issue with respect to notation. You have to be very much clear about notation, what notation you are going to use. So here you know that alpha is, we are calling it learning rate or a step size. There are many names, and there is a well-known theory how to derive this kind of update. So I will talk it when I will discuss algorithm part. Right now, intentionally I'm avoiding, but to derive this equation, you don't need much detail concept. Just knowledge of convexity and differentiability would be enough to derive this kind of equation and Taylor's theorem. So it is a learning rate. We are calling it a learning rate, or sometimes you can call it also a step size. So how much a step you are, it says that how much a step you are uh, uh, proceeding in descent direction. Here you are taking descent direction. Why? Because you are taking negative direction of the gradient at that current point xk. So that's why this direction we can call it descent direction, because there is a process of minimizing our function. Whatever function we are having, we try to minimize. That's why we are proceeding in descent direction from the current point. Xk is the current point. From there, we try to proceed in descent direction. Then we need to take a very suitable learning rate. And generally, what happens? Learning rate having upper bound, it must be positive learning rate, and it must be less than 1 by L. L is what it is. We are calling it L is a curvature, that you are taking bound of the curvature, or bound of the upper bound of the Hessian. Later I will call it. So 1 by L kind of thing is coming here. So this is the actually limit of our learning rate. But what will happen if you starting, you are taking a fixed learning rate, then definitely your algorithm is not going to converge to actual solution in a nice way. Sometimes your algorithm would be very slow. That means it is taking that time iteration. It is taking several iteration, many iteration, and sometimes what will happen, that it will diverge. That means it will pass the solution and go somewhere else. So such two kind of problem is coming. One is we are calling slow convergence rate. Other we are calling it oscillatory behavior. So in order to monitor alpha in adaptive way, that means neither slow or nor divergence or oscillatory kind of things. So we will find alpha as a from line search. So line search, what we will do? So we had function. This function was function of several variable. Here argument x was coming from some Euclidean n-dimensional Euclidean space. X is coming from suppose R2 or R3 or R5, whatever you what dimension of parameter you may take. So dimension might be clear. So suppose x and x is coming from Rn. So in that perspective, what you will do, you will define a new function g. Your current point is xk. So here xk is current point with respect to this point, and you are having a direction. That direction we are calling it descent direction. So that direction v, it is given by negative of the gradient at point xa. So two things you are already having. You are having a current point and you are having a direction. So you need to find an adaptive learning rate. So how you can find adaptive learning rate? So you will define a function of one variable, alpha. Alpha is, you might be, I told that alpha is a learning rate, or it is a uh, a step size. So definitely alpha, it would be always a scalar. So you will define a function g of alpha such that f of xk minus alpha times this direction. Direction is negative of gradient at point current point xk. So you may see here xk is fixed. So due to that, your gradient will be also a fixed quantity. Now, what is variable thing here? Only this alpha is variable thing. That one is a scalar function. So now g is your just a scalar function or function of one variable. So here you can minimize your intention in order to find optimal or adaptive alpha. You have to minimize this function of one variable g of alpha, and you have to get either an optimal value of alpha in such way that your algorithm will reach minimum point with appropriate convergence rate, or you need to find a uh, adaptive size. So there are two approaches. One approach we are calling it exact line search. Exact line search, what this is the exact line search. When you minimize g of alpha with respect to alpha, that search we are calling it exact line search. It is a pure optimization problem. But there is one more technique, that one is very smart technique, that we are calling it backtracking technique. So backtracking, we will talk it later. So backtracking here, calculation, it is a very simple kind of technique. And uh, what happens, here there is a minimal calculation. What suppose alpha is your, okay, sometimes book are taking few book, they are taking t as a step size. So here I have taken alpha, so I have to stick with alpha. Suppose alpha is your current step size, and due to that some oscillatory or slow behavior is there, or oscillatory, that means alpha is big. So how can you make it small? So multiply a fraction, that means a number between 0 and 1 with alpha. So it will backtrack. So here alpha will bring back to the, make it a small. So you have to do in very algorithmic, there is a very good well developed algorithm for backtracking line search. You can check that. I will discuss that in fourth module, that one is algorithm module. There I will discuss in detail about how backtracking we do in optimization algorithm. So those things. So there are, I mentioned two exact line search and backtracking line search. So that's way restricting to a line is very important, because it is converting a function of several variable into function of one variable. And just there, it is a very practical method, and you can establish convexity of a function through that. So coming to outline of my today's lectures, these are the outline. First, I would like to again, what I mentioned the recap. This is the recap that we are restricting function of several variable to function of one variable. Then I would go to discuss about the connection between convexity of a function and convexity of a set as a sublabel set and epigraph set. Here sublabel set, it would be not a uh, what both side implication, but here epigraph will, it will give, it is very much in connection with the definition of convexity of a function. That means if a function is convex, then it will imply the epigraph of the corresponding function is a convex set, or if what epigraph of a given function happens to be a convex set, then it will imply that the function is a convex. So that's why epigraph is more suitable for establishing convexity of function. But again, all these are geometric. So what is the practical thing? There are two characterization of convexity of function with respect to differentiation or derivative. One, we are calling it first order characterization, that is coming defined with respect to tangent hyperplane. That one is involving our first order Taylor's approximation, that involves gradient. So again, this gradient approach is very geometric. And second order characterization, it involves Hessian of the function. So Hessian, if happens to be a positive semi-indefinite, then you can simply say that your function is a convex function. So two approach, and Hessian for a smaller dimension function, Hessian looks very easy to establish the convexity of a function. Or you can say that Hessian is a very practical approach. So one approach is this, another Hessian approach. Both, it looks very practical and feasible operation so that you can establish convexity of a function. And if time permit, then just I will talk about convexity. There are some operations which preserve convexity. So this is the third easiest way to establish convexity of a function. Here, what happens? We know about convexity of simple function. With respect to those simple function, we can establish convexity of the complicated function. So this, so you are having three easy approach through that you can practically establish convexity of a function. First one is restricting to along a line. Second one is finding the Hessian, and third one is going for operation which preserve convexity. So this one recap I had already covered in last class. So I would avoid here. So restriction to a function, it is having. I had told that you have to restrict along a line in the domain of the function. So here, this example we had already seen in last class. So I would like to avoid. So what are the benefits of restriction to a line? So I will talk about benefits. So due to restriction to a line, what will happen? Many algorithms for unconstant optimization problem, convex optimization problem. That means we just minimize a function over the full domain. There is no constant. So simply we put this kind of, we don't put domain of the function. We simply minimize function over complete Rn. So here your domain of the function is to defined throughout uh, Rn. So this kind of problem we are calling it unconstant problem. So when there are many algorithms for unconstant problem, such as a gradient descent or a steepest descent, a steepest descent with exact line. So exact line is always dealing with this kind of problem, that you need to restrict along a line. It is also useful to remember that restriction of a function to a line remains convex. So if you are having a convex function and you restrict that function along a line, the function remain convex. There would be no issue. That means remain convex. That means just you are dealing with function of one variable. Thus tells that is sub problem. So it is one kind of converting into sub problem, that you are just dealing with along a line. We are faced with univariant, so that would along a line, that function will have only a step size variance, so that will behave like a univariant convex minimization problem. So it is the simplest job to find the derivative, first derivative, second derivative, and plot the graph of a univariant function. So hence we can simply also in that process we can simply find the global minima, just finding the zero of the first derivative. Now I would like to discuss further about connection between convexity of a function and convexity of a set. So here two important kind of set we will define. First set we are calling it sublabel set. What is sublabel set? So for a particular alpha we are taking a alpha. So we define a alpha sublabel set of a function. It in the domain of the functions, we define like this way. It is a collection of all the elements from the domain of the given function in such way the functional value is less than equal to alpha. It is one kind of disk representation we are calling it. So once we are getting a sublabel set, what will happen if our function happens to be convex function? If suppose function is convex, it will implies sublabel set is convex. So function is convexity of function implies sublabel set is convex, but converse is not true. That means if you are having every sublabel set of the given function convex, then you can't say that the function is a convex or not. So it is, so convexity of a function implies sublabel set is convex, but reverse is not true. Is convex. S alpha is convex. Okay, so that's where this result is not very much helpful, but this sublabel test is very much helpful if you are going for one other kind of convex function that we are calling it quasi-convex function. So quasi-convex function, this implication is both sides. That means if a function is quasi-convex, it will imply that a corresponding sublabel set is convex, and if corresponding sublabel set is convex, it will imply that the corresponding function is quasi-convex. So you can talk about if sublabel set happens to be convex, then you can say that your function is not convex but convex up to quasi nature. So up to, you can go up to quasi convex nature. But and there is an algorithm by using binary search, you can convert that quasi convex program of optimize quasi convex optimization problem into a convex optimization problem. So there is no issue with this sublabel set as well. But you need a little bit extra, like you need to know a lot about quasi-convex, and then you have to convert that quasi-convex program into a convex program by using binary search. So it is, so we can simply say that it is helpful to verify that the sublabel test is helpful to verify that a given set is non-convex. Just what you will do, you find a non-convex sublabel set, and then you can claim that a function is a if you, anyhow you got to know there is a non-convex sublabel set, then you can claim that your given function would be not a convex function. It is contrapositive kind of relation. You are not going to establish directly that P implies Q. In place of that, what you do, you are establishing that not Q implies not Q. So P implies Q is directly, it is equivalent to not Q implies not P. This contrapositive, we are calling it contrapositive relation, or contrapositive implication, we can call it. So here we had a relation that if F is convex, it implies sublabel set F alpha is convex. Then it is very difficult. You have to, but your idea is that you have to establish convexity of a function. So this one is no more helpful, kind of not helpful, but this test is helpful in regard that if you come to know at least one sublabel set which is not convex, then you can claim that the given function is not a convex function. So it is just giving very good idea to prove negative result, non-convexity. So it is helpful in establishing non-convexity of a function. So that's why I came with this result here. So one example here I have taken. So if you take minus e to the power x, then this function is not a convex function. It is a concave but not a convex. So what is the graph of minus e to the power x graph? It would, so e to the power x, it will go up. So mirror e to the power minus sign you are taking. So it would be mirror image with respect to x-axis. So this is the graph of e to the power minus x. So e to the power minus e to the power x. So you can observe that if you define any sublabel set, so how can you define sublabel set? So sublabel set, always you define f of x less than alpha, x such that f of f x less than alpha. So this is the definition of sublabel set. S alpha you define. So that means here function is minus e to the power x. So minus e to the power x is less than equal to alpha. What does it say? It says that so change negative sign. So it will say that e to the power x is greater than equal to minus alpha, and from here you can define x would be. So here, if you want to remove, you can take logarithmic kind of approach, but logarithmic is not defined for negative number. So here, similarly, uh, you will get a sub-label set. X is greater than some quantity, some. So this kind of things will come. This kind of thing will come. So here you can see that this sub-label set is a convex set. So similarly, you can define several convex set, sub-label set, and if you define any convex, any sub-label set, that would be a convex set. So one-dimensional convex set, and it's just one example here. One more example I have taken here. So take a one-dimensional example I have taken. So here we are taking a function, and the plot is already given here. From the plot, we can observe that the function is having a curvature which is opening up. It is unimodal curvature. It is having unimodal curvature and which is opening up. So simply we can claim that by looking the graph of the function, it is a convex function. So f is a convex function. And if we draw a so what kind of function this one is? This one is x square kind of function, quadratic function. So what is the sublabel set of this one? So sublabel set defined in the similar fashion, that x such that x square is less than equal to alpha. And if you solve this inequality, less than equal to x square less than equal to alpha, what does it will give? It will give an interval. So it is an interval that value is taking between where to where. So it is taking value between minus a square root of alpha to a square root of alpha. So what does it this one? So here in the, it is a sublabel set in this domain. So this one is the line segment between minus a square root of alpha and a square root of alpha. So definitely it is a convex. So if you similarly, if you take any sublabel set, suppose you alpha you take 1 or take 2 or whatever is. Remember that here it is a square function. So alpha you can't take negative number. Alpha must be, we know that a square number can't be less than equal to negative number. So here alpha must be positive or 0. So take alpha equal to 1, alpha equal to 2, and take several alpha and keep on drawing corresponding sublabel set. So with respect to alpha equal to 1, what would be your sublabel set? Your sublabel set would be minus 1, 1. This would be sublabel set interval minus 1, 1. Interval is completely a convex set. If you are taking alpha equal to 2, what would be your sublabel set? It would be minus a square root of 2 up to a square root of 2. So again, it is a convex set because it is an interval. And if you take alpha equal to 0, then it would be a singleton set. Singleton set, again, it happens to be a convex set. So that one is a trivial result. If you take alpha equal to 3, likewise, you will get variety of sublabel set for this function, and you can check that. So convexity implies your sublabel set, it will be always a convex set. So for now, for two-dimensional convex function, here I am taking here. So take a quadratic function like this way, like x square plus y square. Take x square plus y square, and for this function, this is the surface plot. And if you want to do sublabel plot, then you have to define contour, and the region under the contour would be your sublabel set. So here again, x square is positive, y square is positive. So this quantity would be always greater than equal to 0. So your alpha, minimum alpha, you can take 0 and 0, or it would be positive. So here alpha, in order to define a sublabel set, so sublabel set it would be like this way: x such that x square plus y square must be less than equal to alpha, where alpha must be a non-negative number, less than equal to alpha. So what does it give? It is talking about equation of disk. That means area under the surface. So if you take alpha equal to 1, so it will give unit disk. If you are taking alpha equal to 1, then it will talk about x square plus y square less than equal to 1. So what is this? If you try to see in the dominant sub-level set, always see in the dominant space. So it is talking about this kind of this disk with radius 1. So this area, you can see that it is a convex set. So it implies that convexity of function implies your every convex, every sub-level set happens to be a convex set. So this is the test. So this test only for non-convexity, don't apply for convexity of a function. Now we will talk about convexity of a function with respect to its epigraph. Epigraph is playing very important role in order to find or establish convexity of a function geometrically. At least function of one variable you can easily draw epigraph. Also you can go up to function of two variable as well because up to a space you can visualize. So there is a strong connection between convexity of a function and convexity of a set assigning, where what will happen, we will have a graph of the function. Their extra coordinate, it will come from the function value. Extra coordinate will come with respect to function value. So here for a function f from Rn to R, we are defining a graph. Graph is what? It is this collection of all the point x comma f of x, such that x is coming from the domain of the function, and this graph it bisects the Rn plus 1 into two parts. One part we are calling it epigraph. So one part epigraph, that means the portion above the graph, that means x comma t such that f of x, that this functional value is less than equal to t. This one is we are calling epigraph, and another section is hypograph. Hypograph, that means the portion below the graph, on and below the graph. That means x comma t such that f of x less than equal to t. So here I have taken few example. If suppose the graph of a function of this one, a function of one variable, so graph is coming like this is the graph of the function. So here every point in the graph you can denote it by this order pair x comma f of x in the graph, like this way. And what happens? So the region which is above the graph. So this region is the region which is on and above the graph. On means including the graph and above the graph. So this region we are calling it epigraph of the function, and the region which is behind the graph or below the graph, on and below the graph, that we are calling it hypograph. So hypograph we denote it by HYPF, and epigraph we denote by EPIF. So epigraph is important for convex function and hypograph is important for concave function. So we are not going to discuss about concave function because theory is similar to each other. So just little bit, if a function is convex, then negative of that function would be concave. So that's where we will stuck to only convex function. So epigraph, and here clearly you can say that after drawing epigraph for this function, epigraph is not a convex set, because if you take a point from the epigraph, this point is in epigraph and there is one point epigraph. If you draw a line segment between these 2 points from the epigraph, you clearly say that this much portion of the line segment going out of the epigraph, it is actually in the hypograph. So that's why this epigraph is not convex. It is not convex. But if you come for this graph, you are having this kind of graph which is having curvature opening up. So with respect to that, this is the epigraph. If you take any point in the epigraph and you join the line between those 2 points, you will observe that that line segment, it would completely remain in the same set epigraph. So that's where this one is a convex. So very fine. So a function which is having a convex epigraph, we can claim that the function is a convex function, or vice versa. If the epigraph, if function is convex, it will imply that epigraph is a convex set. But here, hypograph, it would be not a convex. Similarly, if you are coming where function is having curvature which is going downward curvature. So in that segment, what we observe that it is having epigraph. That means the region on and above the graph. We observe that if you take one point here, another point here. So what will happen if you draw the line segment between these 2 points? So this much of segment it is going in the hypograph. So that's why this one is not a convex function, because our epigraph is not a convex set. So epigraph testing of convexity of epigraph, it is equivalent to testing of convexity of a function. Okay, so directly I am coming to discuss about. So for epigraph purpose, you can take a lot of function like x square function. If you x square function, you have already seen that. So first draw a graph. You need to, so in order to see epigraph, you need to draw function. So it is helpful for function of one variable and function of two variable. So this is the epigraph. Epigraph, easily you can observe that it is a convex set. So it simply implies that x square is a convex function. If you take a function like line passing through origin or anywhere. So what is the epigraph of this one? Epigraph of this one is this much portion, half a space, this half a space. Because I had already discussed about how to draw a line in several of convex optimization classes. So this one is a line A transpose x equal to 0. So you have to focus on the normal. A is calling we are normal to the line. So suppose this is the direction of normal. So you can say that here epigraph of this function A transpose x is what? It is positive half space. Positive half space, and that happens to be a convex set. So simply you can say that this function A transpose x, this linear function, or f, and correspondingly a affine function happens to be a convex function. Even more, a convex linear function or affine function happens to be convex at the same time concave as well. So it is just behaving like a boundary of the epigraph, or boundary of the boundary nature of class of all convex functions. So it will come on the boundary. You can call it like that. So I will come to discuss about first order characterization of a convexity of a set. This one is very important from application point of view and from optimization algorithm point of view. So what is happening here? We are taking a function which is defined from Rn to R, and it is differentiable on its open domain, and its gradient we are defining as like this way. This column vector transpose I have taken to make it column representation. So gradient of this function is defined at every point from the domain. Then the function would be convex if and only if f of y is greater than equal to f of x. So this one is what you observe. This one is affine function greater than equal to f of x plus gradient time y minus x. So what is this function? This function is your tangent function. Tangent function, we are calling it tangent to the function at, or tangent to the graph of the function at point x. It is talking about tangent function, or hyperplane also you can call it. Tangent hyperplane. Better name, common name you can give it tangent hyperplane. Is a tangent hyperplane. So graph through graph you can observe that. So you are having a function, this kind of function. This is a function, and at this point x you are drawing a tangent which is touching the graph at this point x. And whatever, if you take any point from the domain, so what will happen? Suppose you are taking y, so at y this is y. So at y, what you will observe that the function value, it would be always on and above the corresponding value on this tangent hyperplane. So always this inequality will hold. So you can say that the tangent hyperplane, it is providing a global underestimator or global lower bound for the given function. At any point you can observe globally, it is giving a globally uh, lower bound of the function. So if any point, equality will happen only at the point x itself. But if you take any other point than x, then you will always observe that f of y would be always higher than uh, the value at the corresponding tangent point. That means f y greater than this value on the tangent plane or hyperplane, tangent hyperplane. So it is, you can say that it is giving a global underestimator of the function from below. So this is the plot you can. So it is dealing with gradients. That's why we are calling it is a first order test. Another example, if you are going for 3D function of two variable, so it is in that case you have to draw a surface. Surface always look a little bit complicated. So what you do, you may go for contour plot, and if you are drawing contour, so in contour you will see the direction of gradient happens to be perpendicular to the corresponding contours. So this approach, from here also you can observe that uh, this convexity also you can observe. So at each point, if you just make it oblique, then graph it would be just I have given direction of gradient here, not more than that. I will discuss other example just later. Like if you draw a function of two variable, very simple kind of paraboloid, take a paraboloid like this way. And make it, this is paraboloid. So if you take at any point if you take it here, your hyperplane, tangent hyperplane, it would be a plane. It will touch the uh, surface, and always it will provide a global underestimator. So a little bit complicated to plot tangent plane here in 3D version. That's where this version I had taken. So I will talk about, I thought that most feasible method for derivative kind of test is a second order characterization. There I will discuss in detail. So geometry, if you observe further, here I will talk about geometry of first characterization. What it talk about? It talk about that the tangent hyperplane, it is having a slope. It is given by gradient of the function at point x. And it also, the tangent and the function having common value only at x. Other than x, function value is always this function value is always greater than this value on the tangent hyperplane. And also we had already discussed about supporting hyperplane. So we can observe that this tangent hyperplane, it supports the epigraph. So epigraph is what? This is the region on and above the graph. So this is the epigraph. So we can observe that the tangent hyperplane is supporting the epigraph at point x, where you are finding the gradient. So at that point, it is supporting the epigraph. So it is also supporting. You can say that your tangent hyperplane is supporting hyperplane to the epigraph at point x, where you are finding your gradient. Another geometry, you can say that if you take -1 along with gradient, then it will provide normal direction to the epigraph. So this is the normal direction. Normal direction to the, you can observe that here normality is coming here. So this representation looks very nice in order to convert this tangent hyperplane in the form of what we call it a very compact representation of a hyperplane, that we represent it by x transpose a transpose x by b. For this representation, it would look by here a will be given by gradient of f -1. So a is here normal direction. It is given by gradient of f at point x. remember that here it is defining point wise. If you change the point, your gradient will be different. So it is a point wise definition. So every point, if your function happens to be convex, every point you can always find a global underestimate. If you are here, again you can find a global underestimate. If you are here, then again you can find a global estimate underestimator. Estimator. So what global underestimator would be? Your tangent hyperplane at that point. So at every point you are getting global underestimator of the function as a tangent hyperplane. So that's way it is a both side implication is true. Let me say function is convex. It implies that it satisfies first order characterization, and if a function is satisfying its first order characterization, that means every tangent plane is a global underestimator. Then you can claim that corresponding function is a convex function. So a relation is true from both sides. So that's where I had given proof of this one. You can look into proof if you are interested. I won't discuss in detail. Or I have given proof for n equal to 1. And similarly, by defining this function, that restriction to uh, along a line segment, you can also define prove the result characterization for general case as well. The similar proof technique is very simple. It is just taking a little bit calculus idea, limit idea, and through that you can establish this one. That means you are starting with definition of constitution of a function, and that means you are starting from here and you are establishing this result. First characterization, and reverse is also possible. You start with from this first order characterization, and you can arrive in here this result. Both are true. Both sides are true. Both you can observe that. So the proofs, if you are interested in mathematical proof, you can go for that. But geometry is already very much clear. So, here I come with several result of those things. So directly I get time is already around 45 minutes. So I will take one example here for characterization of first order characterization of constitutivity of a function. So here suppose we are taking, we will define various norms. So we are taking a three-dimensional vector here where t is a free variable. T is a free variable. There is one free variable. So with respect to this, we can define a convex function norm. Norm is always happens to be a convex function. F of t we are defining as a norm. So this norm be any general kind of norm, and plot of the different variety of norm is already given here. So this green line you can observe that it is talking about L0 norm. That one norm is pseudo norm. So it is not a convex norm. That is, it is counting number of non-zero entry. And next one is red line. You can observe that it is talking about L1 norm. L1 norm is a convex norm. From the graph, easily you can observe that it is having a convex epigraph. And blue line, it is talking about L2 norm. L2 norm is it is just a square kind of function. So L2 norm is again it is a convex norm, and L infinity norm is also a convex norm. So this orange color norm, it is talking about L infinity norm, graph plot of L infinity norm. So these are the, so except this L0 norm, other norm are convex. Here what will happen at 0, if this, if you are taking t t equal to 1, if you take t equal to 1, what would be norm? L1 L0 norm. If you are taking t equal to 1, what would be your L0 norm? So your vector would be here 1 0 0. So L0 norm would be just count number of non-zero entry in that vector. So how many non-zero entry you observe? So just only one non-zero entry. So L0 norm would be 1. So it is a arithmetic norm. L0 norm is arithmetic norm. So it will take value 1 here. This kind of things. L0 norm will take 1. If you take something, sometime if you are getting this kind of a structure 0 1 -1, if you take t equal to 0, then you will get 0 -1 -1. So in that case, what would be L2 norm? You observe two non-zero entries. So L2 norm would be L0 norm would be here 2 number of non-zero entries in the vector. So it is 2. So it will vary. So from 1 to 2, and maximum norm would be what? 3. Maximum. If you're taking t other than 0 and 1, then it would be always 3. So that's why 3 is given here. So only two scenario for t equal to 1, you will get L naught norm 1, and t equal to 0, you will get L naught norm 2. Otherwise, L naught norm would be 3. So definitely it is due to these things, 1 and 2 equal to 0, it is taking 2. T equal to 0, it is taking 2, or t equal to 1, uh, it is taking 1. So here, so there is a discontinuity. Here there is a discontinuity for L naught norm. This is discontinuity is there. So due to that, L naught norm is not a convex norm, and apart from that, other norms are convex norm. Even if you define P norm, then P greater than equal to 1, it would be a convex norm. Okay, time is already over. Second factorization we will cover in next class. And regarding attendance, go and mark your attendance there in the Google Classroom. If you are having any doubt, you can ask. Otherwise, I'm going to wind up today's class. Okay? Any doubt, any question? No doubt. Okay, thank you. Thank you for attending class.